Good morning, everyone. First order of business is roll call.
Senator Ellis. Senator Beitman. Senator Salazar. Senator Rothfuss. Representative Andrew. Representative Brown. Representative Connolly. Representative Harshman. Representative Nyman. Representative Newsom. Representative Obermueller. Representative Summers. Co-Chairman Scott. Chairman Paxton.
Here.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum.
All right, welcome, everyone. We have a full agenda for the next 2 days, and so as I always start out the meeting, brevity is appreciated. Our first order of business today is the Wyoming Innovative Partnerships, and so we have 3 folks at the table. One of them very familiar to me from a few years, many years ago now. Would you please introduce yourself and tell us who you represent, please?
Now it's green. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, committee members. My name's Kim Dale, and I'm president of Western Wyoming Community College.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members. My name is Lauren Schoenfeld, and I'm the newly appointed Executive Director of the Wyoming Innovation Partnership. Thank you for having us this morning.
Good morning, Chairman Paxton, Chairman Scott, committee members. My name is Mark Toney, and I'm from Sheridan College. I'm a computer science instructor.
Okay, go ahead.
Absolutely. Wait for some slides to come up. Perfect. So as I stated, I'm Lauren Schoenfeld, the newly appointed Executive Director of the Wyoming Innovation Partnership. And this morning I'm here to give you an overview and then with my colleagues here, share some success stories that we've had so far with the Wyoming Innovation Partnership. So the Wyoming Innovation Partnership was created at the request of Governor Gordon in 2021 to modernize and focus Wyoming's efforts to develop a resilient workforce and economy. The effort aims to better align Wyoming's economic development agenda by increasing collaborations between state entities and ultimately our local partners. The partnership involves the University of Wyoming, all of the state's community colleges, the Wyoming Business Council, and the Department of Workforce Services. There's an emphasis on developing innovative solutions that support and enhance Wyoming's economy, workforce, and sources of revenue. WIP intends to build on and complement existing state efforts in support of Wyoming's economic development strategy, including Wyoming's Tomorrow, Learn to Earn, Wyoming Works, Wyoming Next Gen Sector Partnerships, Workforce Development Council, and the Higher Education Attainment Executive Council. And it also recognizes the need for healthy and sustainable funded institutions to do this work. Can we go back to the slide before this? There you go. So what does this really mean? This morning we're going to give you an overview, and then, like I said, our plans moving forward to phase 2, and then we're going to talk about 2 different charters. You will see that each of these charters or programs are very different, and they satisfy very different workforce needs across the state. So the result of each of them, however, is meeting an industry need and providing Wyoming's workforce the opportunity to earn education and find employment, earning a good wage, all while remaining within our state. The Wyoming Innovation Partnership is a collaboration to align education, workforce development, and industry to support Wyoming's economic development needs. There are many different pieces to economic development, and workforce development is a small but very important piece to this puzzle. Many of Wyoming's current and future businesses require a highly skilled and specified workforce, and without education, collaboration, and alignment with those needs, economic development and diversification becomes hindered across the state. Next slide, please. So I've spent the last 2 months, I've been in this position for 2 months, and I've spent the last 2 months traveling to all of the community college campuses, including the University of Wyoming. I've met with all of the college presidents and many of the teams working on the individual programs as well, along with the economic development groups in these communities. WIP work began about 1.5 years ago, and my goal within the first few months is to organize what's already been completed, identify and track short-term metrics, identify long-term metrics, and then plan and roll out the process for phase 2. So currently, we have identified about 20 short-term metrics and 19 long-term metrics, and we're working through the process of collecting these metrics to measure the impact that WIP is having. Many of the long-term metrics, including the return on investment of WIP funds, will take a few years to collect. However, they will be very valuable once we get there. I'm also looking to support the alignment of higher education and K-12 education with economic development organizations to support workforce development, including BR&E programs, entrepreneurship, and innovation. Next slide, please. So these are, and I know this is small, and I have included in your packets a little bit larger list for you to look at, but these are the current phase 1 charters. We are currently in the middle of phase 1, which has supported the startup of 6 different component categories and 17 different individual programs or charters. It's assisted with purchasing equipment, bringing instructors in and getting them hired, building curriculum, and receiving approval and accreditation of many of these curriculums. We expect that most of the phase 1 charters will continue into phase 2 of the program. However, we will be utilizing data to determine the initial impact, the need, and the return on investment throughout this process. There's also a few phase 1 charters that will not need WIP funding, and they have actually achieve sustainability through phase 1 and won't need additional funding for phase 2. So that's exciting. Next slide, please. This next slide is timeframes and phasing, and it's a brief overview of the phasing, what it's going to look like. As you can see,
Sorry, give us just a moment.
no, you're okay. You can see that phase 1 is standing up the partnership. Phase 2 is where we will begin to see shared curriculum at multiple colleges. And towards the end of phase 2, we will see students start to transfer to the university or begin to enter the workforce. Phase 3 is when we will really begin to realize what that return on investment looks like. And WIP was started oftentimes before the funding and the collaboration was even implemented. The next slide is a QR code and our website. So I've included the QR code on our website, and that's in your packets as well for additional information. So I'm currently working on updating the website to include a short summary of what all of the charters look like and a little bit more detail. And that will be up online very shortly. And now I'm going to turn it over to Mark to talk about the software development charter.
Thank you, Lauren. And again, thank you, Chairman Baxman, Chairman Scott, and the committee members for this time. I sit here grateful and honored. Grateful because of my Wyoming education. I started in Encampment, Wyoming. I went to Sheridan, I went to the university for both a bachelor's and a master's, obtained a career in computer science, and spent 3 decades as a professional software developer. And I've raised a family in Wyoming, and it's afforded me a wonderful life. So Wyoming education, all the way. I'm honored to sit here and represent a group of people. First, my VPA at Sheridan College, Dr. Garrison, Dr. Tribely, president of Sheridan College. They have supported me and showed leadership, and it is their efforts that we have butts and seats this fall in the new program. It would not have been possible without them. I'm also honored to represent Mike Robchek from the University of Wyoming and Dr. Rhea Davis and Tammy Roberts from Western, who couldn't be here today, and a whole slew of other people that have contributed to pushing this program through, helping us with paperwork, getting it through the HLC, the Wyoming Community College Commission. So again, honored to be the person that's speaking here today. Next slide. So we are software development. We are one component of the digital infrastructure. So there's a number of pieces to digital infrastructure, and we represent one of those, and that was the software development program. And the software development program quickly came together and brought all of the community colleges together and the University of Wyoming. We met on a phone for the last year and a half, almost weekly, and hashed out through sometimes intense conversations what the first 2 years of this curriculum was going to look like, what our goals were, where we were going. And so we worked together to make computer science more accessible. And really what we did is we challenged the norms and created opportunities. That was what we were really looking at. You know, what can we do better? Not necessarily different, but what can we offer in addition to what we're doing? I mean, again, wonderful education system in Wyoming, but how can we step it up? Next slide. So we looked at the norm, and this is today, this is the program, this is the path that I took. Wonderful program, no complaints. But the big takeaway from this slide is the blue circle on the left. And what you have is a large group of students and citizens of Wyoming that would like to get into this field. And what we have at the top is a traditional computer science pathway. And it has some barriers for some people that are hard to overcome, specifically math and science. And there was a time when those were needed. And they're still needed. So I don't want to say that this path is obsolete or not needed. It's just, it's accessible to us, to a smaller group of people than we would like to see. And so that blue circle meant we had a lot of interest, but a lot of students never even started. So they walked into my office, they walked into an advising office, they walked into a career, into the university's fair, and they said, show me the curriculum. And they went, I'm not comfortable with that. I'm not sure I can succeed in that. I haven't been introduced to that. I haven't been in a computer class in high school. So jumping into that was very daunting. If they were behind in math, financially that was a barrier. I'm one semester behind. I can't take calc my freshman year. That means I have an extra semester probably tacked on at the end of 4 years minimum. Making up a summer class in advanced mathematics when you're not a mathematician is hard to do in 8 weeks. So you're looking at another. So there were some financial barriers with that as well. So we said, let's challenge that. What can we do differently? Next slide. So what we proposed is the software development program. And there's some confusion, and our industry is terrible. We are advancing so quickly. We change our titles, we change names. But what I'd like you to focus on is a computer science degree as a scientist, and our software development program is more of a craftsman. I like to call it a craftsman. And you have an opportunity now for students to engage in the computer science field because we've lowered the barrier to get into the field because the field has expanded to support that now. So again, 20, 30 years ago, if you wanted to play in the space, you had to know everything or a great deal. You had to have advanced mathematics. The Apollo missions, we're working on these very primitive computers. The cell phone that you carry today could run 120 million Apollo programs at the same time. That's how much we've advanced. Simultaneously, we could run 120 million flights to the moon on your cell phone from 2014. That was an iPhone 6. 8 years ago, we could do 120 million. So the field has expanded. I don't need to be a computer scientist to make contributions. I'll give you one more example. Speech recognition. I don't know how many of you use your phone to text, call home, call my wife, add this to the list, Alexa, what's the weather? That little piece of technology, voice recognition, when I was in school at the University of Wyoming, was being worked on. Super complicated problem. Scientists were working on that. And eventually, technology was able to solve that problem. Scientists pushed us forward. Today, as a software developer, I can plug that in to a piece of software and not have to worry about the mathematics, the science, or anything behind that, and build an app that allows me to maybe deliver it to an elderly person who says, are these two drugs going to interfere with each other if I take them at the same time? I didn't have to know that science. I just had to have the creativity to take those building blocks that scientists are producing and solve business problems. I can be creative, and I have a Lego set available to me to solve business problems. That's what we're trying to accomplish here. We need scientists, we need people with that tool bag that can go and solve those complex problems. And we need software developers who can go and take those building blocks and solve business problems. The two both afford wonderful careers. And if you look at the right, it's a little covered up. Your scientists with the advanced math will push into a higher degree. 6 figures, high 6 figures, not unattainable. Software developers can get into the 6 figures. They can move back and forth. We have students who enter the software development program and thought, Calc 1 is not for me. Or maybe I haven't seen a computer science class, so I'm going to start down the software development path. And what they see then is an interest. They're like, oh, I can accomplish this. And they can move up if they want to do advanced AI, artificial intelligence, self-driving cars, advanced gaming. They can do that. So this is the challenge. Taking what worked for me very, very well, what works for a lot of students, and opening that up to a larger audience. Next slide. And we'll go past this one. I've already mentioned it. The next slide shows some of the barriers. Governor Mark Gordon has said that technology is important, and we should it should be open to citizens of Wyoming too, to possibly upgrade skills, do a transfer. If you looked on the left, that would be pretty daunting to come back into an education system. And so software development, again, provides a pathway for a group of people to get into this field. Next slide. So what have we done? We started, as Lauren said, 1.5 years ago. Ground zero, we began working on this. We got together with the colleges in UW, and we had to challenge that process. That was daunting. I mean, people were really fairly comfortable with one pathway in Wyoming for computer science. That was the only one. There was no, we can't really do a 2-year degree at the community colleges and get into this field. We need a 4-year program. We need that commitment. We need that funding. Over the course of 1.5 years, we worked out the first 2 years, the course outline, where we were going. And then we, at Sheridan College, worked on the course outline and the classes behind that. And we were positioned really well because of a wonderful partnership with Whitney Benefits in Sheridan, who helped rebuild our computer department and engage with our local school districts. And we actually built curriculum not only for us, but from K-12 through the K-14. And now with WIP, we're looking at K through 16 and being able to just progress students all the way through. So this is really exciting, wonderful opportunity. If we go to the next slide. So our initial results are great. We had 40% increase in our introductory computer class. And I didn't have the numbers at the time for the slide, but we enrolled the same number of students in our traditional computer science program, but we enrolled 15 people, which is a huge number, more than double our computer science degree, into the software development program. This fall, 0 advertising because we didn't have it officially credited yet. Walked in and talked to our advisor and said, show me the curriculum. And they were like, I can do that. That's possible for me. And so that's a huge number without any advertising. Next slide. So other areas that we challenged was the concept of real world experience. So in Wyoming, it's difficult for a student to get internships in the tech space. Most shops have 1 or 2 people. It's hard to turn a freshman or sophomore loose against critical data. You got HIPAA if you're in a hospital. You've got security concerns at the state level, proprietary data. And so what we've done is we've flipped that and we said, well, why don't we bring the institutions into the classroom in the project-based learning? And so with Tri-Hydro in the summer of 2020, the University of Wyoming and Mike Robchek proved the value of doing that and the benefit to the students. So over the course of 3 weeks, Tri-Hydro came in with a problem statement, cleansed their data, handed it over to a group of students from across the state. All the community colleges, grad students worked together in teams and came up with solutions to Tri-Hydro's problem. Not fully funded, we're not competing against private business here in any way. This is mainly kind of a think tank, throw stuff at the wall. And the students came back and presented over the course of a couple sessions. Tri-Hydro got to see all of our students in one fell swoop. They didn't have to onboard and wash out anybody. They didn't have to provide facilities. And they created a short list of people they wanted to see after it was all said and done. And so it was a wonderful low-risk option for them. The new program has partners with First Interstate, AgTerra out of Sheridan. Civilian Marksmanship Program is interested in putting together a project doing the same thing, coming into the classroom, presenting it, and seeing what students can do with that real-world problem. Next one. The other place we challenged was college collaboration. One of the goals of the WIP project was to really work together as a state and not as individual colleges. And so the work that we did at Sheridan College to document, put all the materials together, push it through the Wyoming Community College and the HLC have all been handed over to other colleges. And so what took us several months, in fact, almost an entire year by the time we got approved, was handed over to Western, and they were able to start the next day with their process and not have to create anything. The other thing that we're challenging is collaboration across our classrooms. So we're working with Western right now to share resources. So even though it doesn't necessarily work in the funding models, I'm working with her so that our students and her students have the best opportunity possible, regardless of how that funding might shake out. Next slide. So our next steps are to refine these projects. We want to work with projects such that a company can come in, define a project, and then all the community colleges have a shot at it, as well as UW. Dr. Davis is working on years 3 and 4 at UW, so we're super excited about that. We're going to launch a marketing effort, so we haven't told too many students about it. We're working with the School of Computing, another WIP project, to look at camps and piggyback on work that's already being done there. And lastly, we're looking at securing funding to sustain, expand, and recruit additional qualified people and share those resources across the state. So I'll leave with one last note as far as challenging norms and creating applications. As Chairman Paxton said, I came from encampment. And encampment, for most of you, is a timber, agricultural, mining community at the time. And the CTE folks, they weren't CTE back then, got together and decided to buy a robot, a 3-foot robot that you could program. And they brought it to encampment in the mid-'80s, and they put it in the log room cabin that was the business department. That's where we ran everything. And that was my first introduction to computer programming. That was the spark. That was the opportunity. And I'll always be grateful for a log cabin in Encampment, Wyoming, and the teachers that saw that vision. So thank you very much.
And if I could take a privilege of the chair, we have 2 Wyoming high school graduates up here. I understand, Lauren, you're actually from Farson, is that right? And Farson and Encampment, by the way, are both in my district. So, as an education committee, it's always really rewarding to see where our kids go and what they do. And I think because of the education system that we've developed in Wyoming, it doesn't make a lot of difference if you're from a big school or a small school. You have a lot of things that going for you. And I think this is a living proof right in front of us that we certainly are getting the job done in the little schools as well as the big schools in Wyoming. And it's always a really privilege for me to run into one of my former students from years and years ago. And one of the most rewarding things in my line is to have an all-school reunion at these small schools and find out where these kids that came from a fly speck on the face of the earth that are scattered across the country and all the great and wonderful things they're doing. So it's really a privilege for me to have you folks here to make this presentation. And with that, I'll end my privilege and ask if there are any questions from the committee. Mr. Chairman. Mr. Co-Chairman first and then.
So if I'm correct, we aren't born in log cabins anymore, but the computer programs are. Is that the way it works?
That's it.
Yep.
Representative Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And it sounds like a wonderful program, and likewise, it's great to see Wyoming kids growing up in front of us like that. It's pretty amazing. My question is, I've never been a huge supporter of the WHIP program. I felt that community colleges and UW were just flatly underfunded, and we were putting money into a place maybe that wasn't the right way to go. So my question to you is, you started this before the WHIP program started. You said this started a year and a half ago as far as this program. So my question is, how has the WHIP program helped you? I think I know, but I think there's a reason that the WHIP program has helped this particular computing program along. So if you could explain that to me, I'd appreciate it.
Sure. I think WHIP and the people at the moment, again, it takes people to make this happen. And there are times in history, when just the right people are all in the right places to make this happen. WHIP was sort of the catalyst that brought together people to a table. It brought UW to the table, they brought all the community colleges to the table, and they brought a problem to the table. Technology, a future in technology, skilled workers in technology. And the people that came to the table were willing to challenge the norms, and WHIP provided that infrastructure to make that happen. Organically, without WHIP, it would have been nice, but it's hard for one or two people from an institution to come forward and gather up one or two people from another institution and say, hey, let's make a major change. Let's make a historic change to what we're doing here in Wyoming. WHIP was that catalyst. WHIP is making that happen, at least from the software development side. We have been good stewards of the money. We have produced results. We have students sitting in seats this fall. I haven't been in academia very long. And what we've accomplished in a year and a half is really remarkable, to just do all that and have somebody sitting in a brand new class. So WHIP made that environment, and the right people were here today to work in that environment.
Okay, follow up? Okay, all right. Yes, Representative Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. I too was not that intrigued by WHIP, honestly, thinking that it was repetitive. It wasn't going to move us forward. But what I saw today is something somewhat unique. That being said, I think it could be a model for us as we move forward in terms of the state. And honestly, I've been on this committee, I think, for almost the 14 years I've been here. And one of the things that I have thought about is the need for a statewide governance structure for higher ed. Now, everyone tends to hate that, but it's one of my last meetings, and I want to be able to say it. And I joked around with my colleague to the left. He said I could go out with a bag. I mean, that let's face it, having a community college system that was based on regions, where there's mill levies for regions, and then having a university, and the idea that you only need diesel mechanics, which we probably don't need anymore, over in Western, but we don't need healthcare around the state. All of that is out, right? Let's face it. It's time for us to really think about what we need as a statewide system, a governance model that supports it. And maybe we could look at what you've done in terms of computer science as a model for what we could use going forward. But that's something I'd like to just put out there, that I do think that it's time for us to begin to think differently. It would solve not only the problems regarding computer science, but maybe in terms of community college funding. And I know by the daggers that I'm getting from so many of you that we've talked about this before, and everyone said, just let it lie. But we really could be thinking far more innovatively about post-secondary education at a higher level. And I think you're giving us a model to do it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any response to that, or was that more of a statement than a question?
Again, this would be one of those, don't you agree?
I don't know about funding. That's way above my pay grade. But what I do know is that there's still an opportunity, even with the funding that we have and the structures that we have in the mill levy, to be able to work amongst the community college if we want to. And that's what we're seeing in software development. And so irregardless of maybe the structure, it's not holding us back necessarily from trying new things, and software development is trying to really challenge the norms and create opportunities.
Okay, anyone else? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a quick question. Thanks for, you'd mentioned in your presentation about your enrollment's up 40%. So how many students are we talking about in software development? Kind of what's the need out there? And kind of give us that picture.
Go ahead.
Good question. There's a lot of, we can throw a lot of numbers at you. Industry-wise, nationally, globally, just in the US, we have millions of unfilled jobs. Even with the Twitters and the Google layoffs, the computer programmers and the scientists are still in great demand. My daughter is less than a year out of college and is making a lot more money than I am. I mean, and she went out with a bachelor's. So there are people sitting in Sheridan working for Fortune 500 companies. And so millions of jobs in all industries, logging, mining, agriculture. AgTerra writes software for the ag community. They are looking for and partnering with us to find software developers that they can't bring in. Wyoming is a little bit unique. We're a small state, and so we don't have tons of software development companies, but we have lots of developers in the state. Lots of people like me got their education, went out, spent a few years in Denver. I was in the Front Range, and then I brought my software company back to Wyoming to raise my kids and send them through the Wyoming system. Eventually, I think that model will see people building bigger and bigger companies. But I work with people in Sheridan who write code for a living, and the money they bring back from those jobs goes into Main Street, it goes into the school system, it goes into the taxes. And so lots of jobs are available. And we're seeing as that software development, as that widens and the tools become better and better, we're seeing data analysts show up that need that skill set. People, we have software developers in the college who are working on our institutional research, writing code, ag departments writing code. We're teaching ag students about computer programming. So there's a huge need just because every industry needs software. Every industry.
Follow up?
On your slide that had next steps, the last one was secure funding to sustain, expand, and recruit additional credentialed instructors. So how many are you talking about? I mean, is it in this area, you need a dozen more instructors, or you need 100 more?
Not 100. I don't have. I mean, really, it's a function of how many students are in there to some degree. What we would like to see is some sort of representation, technical representation at each of the colleges, so that a student in Powell who's comfortable starting in Powell, from Powell, and wants to start their career, their educational career in Powell, can enroll in the software development program even if Powell isn't fully staffed, because we want to leverage resources across all of the colleges and the university. So that's the model we're looking at. It's nice to have somebody there on the ground, meeting with the students, advising the students, building a relationship, but we've built the program to be fully online. And so I have students who are retooling out of Colorado, a family has a family and is taking my classes out of Colorado, and I have students in the dorms who come and see me in my office every day. And so having those faculty spread across the state in order to both support the program and support the students in a face-to-face environment is what we're talking about in terms of expanding that. So I would not say 100 people. That'd be a great problem, but I would like to see just technical representation at the community colleges.
Mr. Chairman, If I may add on to that, I believe that, I mean, as a whole, WIP is about the partnership and the collaboration and the alignment across the state. And so Mark is absolutely right in that if we have technical expertise at other community colleges or at the university, we want to utilize those. So we have to really, after we get the program stood up, we have to understand what those needs might be, what enrollment might be across the state, how we can do this amongst ourselves without adding resources if not needed. If we do need additional instructors, then we absolutely will be able to identify where those gaps are throughout our community colleges and the university, and then bring those in as needed. And I would like to, we also brought Dr. Dale from Western Wyoming Community College to share. She'll be very brief, but about the Powerline Technology Program as well. And we do have 2 slides on the end of that slide deck with that.
Okay.
Thank you very much, and I will be brief. There's only 2 slides, so if we could put that first one up regarding Powerline Technology. And Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chairman, members of the committee, Representative Summers, I want to answer that question that you asked after I'm done explaining a little bit more about Powerline, if that's acceptable to you. So I've been involved with WIP from day one. It was a collaboration with all of the college presidents and the university president, and this was how it was born. And if you remember an earlier slide from Ms. Shainfeld that showed the components, and I oftentimes call them sectors, you'll remember there's one for energy. And so the governor helped us come up with where these focus sectors and components would be. And then we put teams of experts together for each of those components, representing a variety of the colleges as well as the university. So I had the privilege of working with the energy component sector. And what happened is with each of these, the priorities sort of bubbled up, and there was data that was collected to determine where we should first focus. So interestingly enough, in this energy component, Powerline technology rose to a top priority through these collaborative relationships and conversations with the university and the colleges. And it was a natural fit for Western to take that on first, because Western has an already established electrical and instrumentation program, as well as in 2019 BC, before COVID, we had already done some research on what a Powerline technology program might look like in the state. So we had already done a little bit of homework. We had already talked to a number of industry partners about this. So it came together organically, but we had our feet on the ground a little bit already, and I think that helps explain why Western has been able to move forward so quickly with this program. The other thing I think is important, just to underscore what Mark was saying, is that this WIP is absolutely a partnership with the university and the colleges, and it wasn't about, well, that program is CTE, and how is that going to benefit UW? It wasn't about that at all. It's about what's best for Wyoming, what's best for our economy, and I think that this program is a good example of that. So when we had done some of our earlier research, we talked with Rocky Mountain Power and a number of industry partners, which you'll see on the next slide, but what we learned is that there were a lot of students in Wyoming that wanted to become linemen, and we were sending those students to Idaho to be trained by a private college, very expensive. And so the question was, well, why do we not keep them here? Why don't we have something here? And in talking with our industry partners, and particularly Rocky Mountain Power, they said they were not having a lot of great success with having individuals from other states, out of state, come to Wyoming and relocate and stay in the position. So the point is that they were saying, we want to educate Wyoming students to stay in Wyoming, because the bottom line is Wyoming students have grit, Okay, so you can see on this slide what a beautiful day it is in Rock Springs while these folks are climbing the pole. But how about a couple of days ago when there was a snowstorm, right? And so these folks have to have grit. They have to really be willing to work out in these elements. And what our employers are finding is that not everybody has that ability to do that. Yes, they might think that they do, but then after a couple of years, they're out. So that's why they were so interested in Western looking into launching this program. So anyway, we were able to get the program up and running fairly quickly, if you think about it, from how long it takes to get a program going, because of the WIP funding. The WIP funding provided us the funding to hire somebody and have some time to develop a program, grow the enrollment, and then be self-sustainable. Now, for those of us who know a lot about career and tech ed, we know that some of these programs it's very difficult to maintain the sustainability. I mean, you could look at a nursing program. They're very expensive, but this is where industry partnerships come in, and you'll see here in a minute who is already on board to help Western with that sustainability. So WIP helps us get this off the ground, and then it's up to us to find the ability to sustain this with enrollments and other funding and industry support. One of the biggest challenges in getting this program up and running was finding a qualified instructor, because of course they can make oodles more money out in the field. But we were just hoping for someone who was really tired of climbing a pole and wanted to give back. And we found that individual. We did have to go to Alaska, but we found Lance, and he's with us now doing an incredible job. And regarding the job, I mean, I think everybody understands that this is a job that what is, in my industry we call H3. It is high wage, high skill, high demand. This is not going to go away. We see on the horizon, this is just going to continue to grow. Even with all of the natural disasters, et cetera, these folks are going to remain very active, and then consider what's going on in our state as well. Couple of things about our students. We do have 7 students enrolled in the program, and they currently are coming from Evanston, Green River, Farson, and Jackson, and Afton. And what we're learning from our students is they're already recruiting the next group, their buds. They're talking to their buddies throughout the state. We're seeing a lot more interest from the other side of the state and actually out of state as well. So these folks have a tremendous opportunity to make some very good income. So in no time, there's going to be a lot more new pickup trucks driving around our state. So if we could go to the next slide, please, just to highlight some of our partners, because this is a very, very important part of the WIP, is to make sure that we are demonstrating how we are working with business and industry and how those folks are supporting us as we move forward. It's a win-win. So I do want to give a shout out to all of these folks on our advisory board, as well as Rocky Mountain Power, who has provided equipment already. They have provided manpower. Before we even had some of our equipment because of supply chain issues, they brought over their diggers and their employees, and they've helped us, and they still continue to help us. They're very, very involved. And so we will continue to partner with all of these folks and more. And a couple other things I wanted to share is that we are now having conversations, because this program has already been successful and looks to continue to be successful. We are being asked by our industry partners about expanding programming into electric utility substation technology. So that's what's next. And everybody, I think, is very well aware of what is happening in Southwest Wyoming related to the energy sector. And so Rocky Mountain Power is going to be a partner with Western for a very long time, because we will now be looking into that new energy sector called nuclear. And then one other couple of quick things is that Western is moving forward in the process to look at a new modest building for the Powerline program. And also, I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to the college. 2 weeks ago, we received the Rock Springs Rock Star Award or industry partner. So we're very proud of launching this program. We are very grateful for WIP in helping us because it would have been very difficult to get this up and running this quickly. And I am happy to answer any
Okay,
questions.
thank you. Questions from the committee? Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you. Both of these programs, computer science and the Powerline Technology programs, are programs that lead to very good paying jobs. Wouldn't you agree? And so one of my concerns has been about the wage gap between men and women in the state. And so I'm curious about what percentage of your enrolled students in each of those programs are women?
Representative Connolly, Mr. Chairman, and Representative Connolly, right now, 0 women are in that program. And I will also add that prior to coming to Wyoming, I served as the chief academic officer at Western Nebraska Community College, where we had the Powerline program. And we really struggled with getting women into that field. But there might be more opportunity with this substation technology as opposed to climbing the poles on a snowy, blustery day.
Mr. Chairman, in computer science?
We're about 30%. We have a real strong focus. I have 2 daughters in computer science. And so and one of our instructors is a talented woman, and she's embedded in the high schools. And so she fosters relationships, and we really try to encourage and welcome women into our program.
So thank you, Mr. Chair. And if I could just make a follow-up that to really encourage you to maybe think differently about the recruitment, to build on the 30% that you have right now. I mean, we know that in community colleges, we have more women than men, but we see it as we do at the university. There's a real imbalance when it comes to some of the colleges. And so if you would really put that on your agenda to increase your recruitment and think about your recruitment strategies. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I would also like to share that that is one of the key metrics that we will be tracking is gender in enrollment in all of these programs. So,
Okay, further questions from the committee? Okay, thank you for your presentation, and with that, I'm going to turn the gavel over to my co-chair, Scott.
Okay. We're going to proceed next to the community college funding item on the agenda. We've got 3 bills here to deal with. First one is LSO 0238, Community College Funding Distance Education Credit Hours. Tanya, can you give us a very quick summary of what's in the bill? And community college people that are going to testify, can you come forward too? Because you'll be up next. Okay, Tanya, proceed when you're ready.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Tanya Heitrick, Legislative Service Office. The first bill for your consideration is 23 LSO 238, Community College Funding Distance Education Credit Hours. Recall at your last meeting, you considered a bill moving the weight for distance education, 23 LSO 00, I think it was 75, moving the weight for distance education from the 0.8 to 1.0. The committee didn't move that bill forward, but instead adopted an alternative approach that's incorporated within this bill draft, which eliminates the full-time weighted equivalency for distance education classes and instead weights those classes based on the content. I'll just go ahead and briefly walk through the bill. On the bottom of page 1, line 10 through page 2, line 11, these are amendments to 21-18-012. And moving on to the second page, you'll note the substantive amendment on page 2, line 11, and excuse me, line 10 as well. This is the definition for the distance education course for purposes of utilization in the funding, community college funding allocation model. Section 2 repeals 21-18-01-102A, Romanet 18, capital A. This is the provision that was the weighted 0.8 average for distance education courses. Section 3, this act is effective July 1st of 2023. That's on page 2, line 15. Subject to your questions.
As I understand it, with the repealer, we're getting rid of that 8/10 provision. And that the reason we did that, committee, was that our experience has shown that you need as much attention to the students and therefore as much personnel, which is the big expense, whether you're distance or in person. So the 0.8 was just unrealistic. And the other change is simply part of the implementation of that. Is that a correct reading
Yes.
of what's going on in the bill?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, it modifies the definition of distance education to weight those courses based on content.
Okay, any technical questions in the bill? Under office.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm curious about the effective date with regard to the logistics of implementing the associated budgets through the colleges and the funding model. And is July 1, 2023 going to implement this in a rational way, or is it going to screw things up for the fall of 23 registration cycle? So have we thought that through?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rothfuss, I think the Community College Commission can best answer that question.
Community college.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. I'm Sandy Caldwell, Executive Director of the Community College Commission. And Senator Rothfuss, I can answer that question for you. We can implement that as of July 1. We can manage that and navigate it.
Okay, thank you. Community College Commission, any general comments on this bill? You all support it?
Mr. Chairman, I did want to take the time to make sure that you and the committee know that we actually have 3 commissioners in the audience today. These bills are so critically important that they made the trip to provide some comments for you. Dr. Jackie Freeze is the chairman of the commission. She's going to speak on this particular bill. We have Vice Chair Megan Getz. She's actually out on a court hearing in the hallway. She'll be back in just a moment. She actually wants to provide some comments on the whip whenever you have a chance to let her do that. And then we have Commissioner Greg Blickery from Gillette, who is also here. And in the interest of brevity, they're only going to speak on different ones, so you don't have all 3 talking on each thing. So with that, if I may, I'd like to turn it over to Chairman Freeze.
Thank you, Dr. Caldwell. And thank you, Chair and Co-Chair. And to answer your question, Senator Scott, yes, we do support this bill. Just a few brief comments, because I know you've had a lot of discussion about this and you have a weighty agenda today, but this is an important part of our funding simply because we serve all of the counties in the state, and many of the students that take classes from our institution certainly do it through distance. And we want those students to be served. We want to be able to provide all of the support that they need and the ability to take the classes when they need and how they need to complete their educational journey. And in order to do that, the distance ed becomes really important. And I think one of the things that was a real challenge when this was implemented is that there was a belief that to offer something via distance, particularly online, meant that it was less expensive. And I think nationally that was a misunderstanding in terms of how many students could be served by that kind of effort and what kind of service and support that those people needed. But what really is true is that there is no difference in cost, or if there is a difference, it sometimes is more expensive to offer a class via online or distance. And the support that's needed for students exists no matter how they take something. It may exist in a different format, but students still need to be advised, they still need to be registered, they need support support and counseling. They need all kinds of services that have to be there in order for somebody to succeed. And then certainly from the faculty standpoint, the level of preparation, the amount of work that goes into particularly developing an online course and making sure that it has a quality standard that we all adhere to is more expensive in many cases and certainly requires significant work, the same amount of work, if not more, that you would find in live online or live in-class sessions. And so I think one of the things that has evolved over time is that that understanding is now there more readily than it was in the past, and that the cost of these kinds of programs, while different, certainly are not less. And so we really appreciate the willingness of this committee to take this on and move forward, an effort to remove this from the legislation so that that is not a consideration in the future, and that the levels that we have, which are based upon the type of instruction that is offered, whether it be a lecture or a lab or something that's more intensive, are the levels that will be considered regardless of the modality of the instruction. So I'll stop speaking at this point and say, yes, we really endorse this and we appreciate the committee's willingness to take it on. I also personally appreciate that we have a committee to take these things on now. It's very exciting to have a committee that's a little more knowledgeable about the community colleges and able to not only understand the funding dynamics, but how we do business. And so thank you very much for taking this on and for moving it forward. And I would stand for any questions that you have for me.
Questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Anybody else here want to speak to this bill? Anybody else? Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Regina Clark. I'm a trustee at Western Wyoming Community College. I'm also the president of the WACD Association for the Community College Trustees. And we support, the committee has supported this, and we agree with them as trustees as we see our students going through college. A lot of them cannot leave home, attend college in person, and especially with COVID. And so, as an elected official, as a trustee, this is very important to our colleges, and we support, and the commissioners support us.
Committee, any questions? Let me ask one.
Sure.
This is really, we're trying to align the funding model to reality here.
Yes.
We aren't having major effects on the funding among the several colleges, are we? Am I right in thinking this is?
Absolutely.
In the overall sweep of things, it doesn't make one college much richer than the other?
No, sir. We're trying to do this in unison like we do from one end of the state to the other.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Anybody else? Anybody else? Public testimony is closed. Do I hear a motion on the bill? Move the bill. Second. Okay. Moved Representative Summers, second Representative Nyman. Okay. Any further discussion? Any amendments? Question being called. This is a motion is to introduce. Roll call vote. Also call the roll, please.
Mr. Chairman, on 23 LSO-0238, Community College Funding Distance Education Credit Hours, Senator Beitman, Senator Ellis, Mr. Chairman, would you like to leave it open for Senator Ellis?
Because I think she'll be right back.
Okay. Senator Rothfuss? Aye. Senator Salazar? Aye. Representative Andrew? Aye. Representative Brown? Representative Connolly? Aye. Representative Harshman? Representative Nyman? Aye. Representative Newsom? Aye. Representative Obermueller? Representative Summers? Aye. Co-Chairman Paxton? Aye. Chairman Scott?
Aye. Okay, that's That one carried. Do leave it open to the end of the day, see if the other two want to vote. Next bill for our consideration is Community College Funding Inflation Adjustment, LSO 0239. Tanya, can you give us a very quick overview? And again, Community College, we're going to ask you all to come forward to speak to this.
Mr. Chairman, this is the second bill that you requested related to community college funding. You directed staff to work with the Wyoming Community College Commission to create a statutory mechanism to address external cost adjustment through the budgetary process. As far as walking through the bill, beginning on page 1, line 9 through page 4, line 4, this amends 21-18-203. This is the budgetary statutes controlling the submission of the Wyoming Community College's budget to the Joint Appropriations Committee in the legislature. The substantive amendment can be found on page 2, lines 14 through 22. This new language authorizes the commission to include an inflationary adjustment request during the biennial budget beginning with July 1st of 2024. And then on page 3, lines 4 through page 4, page 4, line 2, this creates subsection G, which outlines the requirements associated with making the request, including cost indices attributable to the model components, prior and proposed tuition and fee increases, estimated local revenues, and it also requires that the ECA be distributed proportionally to the funding allocation model, which is contained in 21-18-205C. The effective date on this bill is also July 1st of 2023. You can find that on page 4, line 4, subject to your questions.
Okay. Thank you very much, Community College Commission. Tell us about this bill. Excuse me. And you've.
Yeah, one technical question.
Representative Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I guess I assume this is pretty much just out of our directive on drafting of the bill. But the one question I have, I guess, to you, Tanya, and maybe to Matt would be, is there a way to have a third party look at these? You know, obviously we usually, as the legislative body, have a third party on the K-12 side look at indices to make sure, you know, we don't ask the districts to provide us the indices. We try to get those indices on our own, and ultimately the legislature is going to be in the same position with this, is will we have trust in the indices? So was there any discussion internally when you drafted the bill of how to bring this back to ensure we have some third-party examine indices?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Summers, Matt Wilmarth and I did discuss that. And as sort of a compromise, I think with also the input of the Community College Commission, there is a provision that allows for each inflationary indices to be targeted to the components of the model. I don't know for certain, perhaps Matt could answer this question, but I suspect there were only a few indices that sort of applied to those particular components.
Where is that provision page in line?
Mr. Chairman, that's on page 3, lines 8 through 13, really. So it shall include necessary information and appropriate inflationary cost indices for the components of the fixed and variable operation costs of the community college. And to your point, Representative Summers, we could certainly request a third party, but even in the context of the K-12, it doesn't require us to utilize a third party. We do that because it's not expertise that we possess in-house at LSO.
Mr. Chairman, and this is getting in the weeds probably, but we're down to the bill, so I guess I'll get into the weeds. Is there a way, you know, I guess while we're discussing this bill and you guys think about it back there, is there a way to put in there that the legislature shall examine, in other words, force us to examine the indices after they're provided after they're provided by the commission. And then that would give us, at least, in statute, we'd have a heads up, okay, maybe we need to examine these indices.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Summers, that's exactly how the bill would operate. When they submit their budget request, they are required to provide the information contained in subsection G, which would include all of those specific indices. In the event that you didn't agree with it, there's no requirement that you follow the request, just as in the K-12 context, but it gives you sort of a litmus test, if you will.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so, Tanya, I guess, I'm just thinking out loud, but I want it a little stiffer than that the legislature will actually examine the indices that the community college provides. And I think the reason is I just think we need to do that and have it in statute that we're going to do that. So then there's no question later on, well, we didn't really understand those indices. We don't know if those indices. So if we actually task ourselves with making sure those indices are adequate or whatever. So, I'll bring a conceptual amendment at the right time and I just have you guys think about it. Thank you.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, Representative Summers, just one question on the conceptual amendment that you'll be bringing. Is it just related to the indices or to the inflationary indices in total, which includes all of the elements in subsection G? I think if it's specific to the indices, that's Romanet 1 on lines 8 through 13. If it's the entire inflationary indices, including tuition, proposed tuition or fee increases and estimated local revenues, as well as the other items listed there on page 3. I think the more appropriate place to put that is on lines 4 through 6.
So thank you for that. But Mr. Chairman, just at first blush, I would do it on I, because the tuition thing is, there's going to be projections for tuition. I think that's fairly cut and dried. It's these inflationary indices that'll be within the model that will be challenged. And I think we just need to look at them. And then I think that gives us more comfort with them.
Mr. Chairman, over here, in Representative Summers, the current step in the K-12 process is these recommendations come to the Joint Education Committee, and then a recommendation from this committee goes to the Appropriations Committee. Are you looking for that two-step process, or are you just looking for those to be identified within their standard budget request to the Joint Appropriations Committee?
No, actually, Mr. Chairman, thank you. As it's written, I just know that some of the indices, have come under question on the K-12 side. So let's just be upfront and say the legislature is going to examine these indices after they're handed to them. And then I think we have then we can decide what that process is later.
Let me say, Mr. Wilmot just answered the question that I was going to have, that it is just a process that goes to the Joint Appropriations Committee and as opposed to JEC. I will say that I'm going to be pretty skeptical of hypothetical amendments. I think we need to have something firm. It would be very helpful if you could have a specific amendment and recognize that it can be refined in the first committee. But putting one, if you want something in, putting one in the specific, so that we're actually voting on a specific thing and not something that's half drafted. And it doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be enough placeholders so the first committee will recognize what you're talking about. Community College Commission, any further comments on this bill?
Mr. Chairman, yes. First, I wanted to address the topic of the amendment. We have no issue, concern with that, so adding that would be appropriate. And when we would promulgate your roles to help define how that process would actually work. So that would certainly be appropriate and would be acceptable, certainly on our end of it. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Chairman Freeze. I think she has the comments for you.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Co-Chair, and committee, again, I'll be brief and just make a couple comments, starting with, yes, we certainly support this request and hope that it will move forward. One of the challenges that we've been facing for a number of years, as most of you know, is the whole issue of sustainable funding for the community colleges and addressing some of the inflationary problems and challenges that we've had over the years. And we were tasked by the legislature a couple of years ago to work on to develop a working group to work on sustainable funding, and we came back with a number of recommendations, some of which have been considered, including that we have a committee that is sort of the place where the community college can go and discuss these kinds of issues. And that has, at this point, become you folks, and we really appreciate that because it is very helpful to have a group of people who understand some of the dynamics that come into play, and that the community college funding has been slightly different than many of the other funding mechanisms in the state. And so we certainly appreciate the ability to have a mechanism to bring forward inflationary or other kinds of cost increases for variable and fixed costs for the community colleges on behalf of the community colleges, and know that that will be something that we take very seriously, and we'll be doing appropriate analysis as much as we possibly can to make sure that the concerns that we express are legitimate. But it is just one step in helping that sustainable funding challenge that we have. So having said that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and thank you very much for moving this forward.
Okay. Committee, any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Is there anybody else here that wishes to speak to this bill? Aaron Taylor.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Erin Taylor, Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of Community College Trustees. I just wanted to thank the committee for doing a deep dive into this issue and just give you a little bit of going down memory lane. The WACD here has been presenting this as part of our advocacy platform for a few years now, and really bringing to light how the process works, how it is different from K-12, what's allowable in the commission statutes, what they can and cannot bring forward. We've had AG's opinions on all of this, and here we are today, a committee that's really doing the deep dive and learning how this process works. And so while this isn't an automatic and the justification and the due diligence will happen, it's really important to have the opportunity. So I just wanted to thank the committee for that. And if there's any questions you have moving forward, please reach out. I'm happy to, give you some background information, white papers, whatever it might be to help support how this moves forward. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Questions, committee? Is there anybody else? Is there anybody else? Okay, public testimony is closed. Do I hear a motion on the bill? So moved. Moved by Summers. Second over here somewhere. Representative Conley. Albert, did you have an amendment?
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I believe Tanya has a smaller, better amendment than the one I wrote. So Tanya, if you wouldn't mind reading that.
Certainly, Mr. Chairman, Representative Summers, that amendment is on page 3, line 9, after indices, comma, to be specifically reviewed by the Joint Appropriations Committee, comma, and then it would continue on. For the components of the fixed and variable operation costs of ...
So Mr. Chairman, I would move that amendment, and if I get a second, I'll explain.
Second. Seconded.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I just think it's important that right off the bat, the Appropriations Committee takes the time to study these indices, because ultimately they're going to make a decision anyway. So if it's in statute that they kind of have to review them and study them, I just think it'll be a good thing. I think it'll make for a better process.
I hear somebody, Cinderophis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On the motion to amend, obviously with K-12, we have it start here. We do the deep dive as the responsible committee. Then it goes to the Appropriations Committee, and they look at our recommendation. Why would we do it differently and skip over us and go directly to appropriations if we're going to continue to have responsibility for the colleges? Should we mirror that and say Joint Education Committee and Joint Appropriations Committee as the amendment?
Let me answer that one. Taking nothing away from the importance of the community colleges, which I think are very important in terms of serving a lot of the students in this state and getting them into the world of work at a much more profitable for the student level and more profitable for the state in terms of meeting our workforce needs. Frankly, I think that we've got an odd procedure with the K-12 because it is our absolute first priority. And I think that our constituents believe that. This one is, while very important, is much more of the kind of budget issue that appropriations deals with fairly routinely. Frankly, I think they'll make the final decision no matter what we did. So we're not looking for work that isn't going to really mean that much. So that's why it's written the way it is. We are pushing the JAC. Look at this, frankly, because I think that during the most recent downturn that ended a couple of years ago, our community college funding did not keep up with inflation. I think it caused some real harm. And we're trying to push the JAC, but I don't think it's worth a big fight, and I don't think the results would make any difference if we did put it in the JAC. So that's my explanation to answer your question.
Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you. You know, I don't mind it coming back through JEC. I think the chairman is correct. You know, that whole process came really out of a court decision. I'm not saying that it's bad to do it that way, but I think ultimately my goal was just to make sure that this is studied by the legislature, the indices are studied, and that we then have a comfort level with how that happens. And I wanted to make sure that was in statute. So I don't have, if you want to bring a motion, you know, bring a motion, but I'm comfortable with the JAC.
Mr. Co-Chairman? I just have a question. Thank you. And this is just on, you know, our ability to bind another committee. I think we have authority to tell the commission what to do, so we could tell them to submit their indices to JAC, but I don't know that we can tell JAC to review it. And I get what you're saying, but it's kind of that slippery slope when we start telling our future legislatures what they shall or shall not review. Like, we can tell them what they can receive and then do something with it. So I'm wondering if submitted to JAC would be a friendly amendment?
Representative Summers.
So, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for that question. Actually, with the current K-12 ECA process, we mandate in statute both JEC and JAC. And so it's not uncommon in statute actually to have JAC review things. It's happened multiple times. So.
But I think if this amendment is passed, the practical effect is going to be, it'll be in the materials. It'll be available to all the rest of us if we choose to argue with the JAC on the floor in the budget bill. And that will be quite useful. But, you know, we can't mandate that the Joint Appropriations members read and pay any attention to it any more than anybody can tell us what we've got to read and pay attention to. But we'll ensure that the information is there if we need to use it. So I think it's frankly fine the way Representative Summers is being proposed, and we can add more verbiage, but frankly, I don't think it'll make much difference.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Maybe a question then for LSO. I just like mirroring language then. Where's the language that Representative Summers then mentioned? I just want to see if they match up. Just curious.
I did, Mr. Chairman. Senator Ellis, I didn't pull that language directly from the K-12 statutes. I just came up with that on the fly in response to his request. So in the language within 21-13309 related to the external cost adjustment, it does say they shall receive and review reports in accordance with, and it goes on.
And frankly, we can deal with that in the first committee if it's important. Representative Conley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I'd like to offer a friendly amendment because I've become convinced that really this committee too should be able to take a look at those indices. We've heard repeatedly how grateful the community colleges are now to have a committee to report to. We've talked about how important reviewing those indices are. So my friendly amendment would be to add JEC with JAC. So the amendment would read to be specifically reviewed by the JAC and JEC. Would the bringer of the amendment find that friendly?
Mr. Chairman, I think there's been enough debate on that. I think just bring it as an amendment to the amendment and see if it flies.
Is that what you're doing?
Yes, so Mr. Chairman, I'd like to bring that as an amendment to the amendment.
LSO, do you have that? Is there a second? Second, her office. Everybody, in further discussion? Everybody understand? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That carried. Back on the amendment as amended. Any further discussion? They understand? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? That, I heard one no. Senator Ellis, okay. So that's carried. Anything further on the bill? Senator Biden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 3, Romanet 2, we talk about the commission shall identify prior and proposed tuition increases. I think I'm going to propose an amendment to, at the end of line 19, let's see, I have it typed out here. Add the commission shall not be eligible for an external cost adjustment if tuition and fees were increased in the previous biennium. I don't think if they're raising tuition and fees on our students, making college more expensive, I don't think they should be coming to us asking for a ECA.
Mr. Chairman, just from a technical standpoint, I think perhaps the appropriate place to include such an amendment would be on page 2 in the new language where they're authorized to request an external cost adjustment. Romanet 2 is just specific to the information to be received, but it's as a technical request. I think the appropriate place is in the new language on lines 14 through 22 for that amendment.
Senator Bateman, is that okay with you? Okay, we'll take the advice on that. Okay. Second, all right with that? Yes. Okay. Discussion. Senator Office.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Concern I have with this amendment is that the colleges are not entirely funded by tuition. A portion of their funding comes from tuition, and that amount needs to go up with inflation, whatever index you use, as does the amount that's funded by the state. And then you've got community funding as well, right? So you've got 3 portions of the funding. So the math just doesn't work out in the long run. If the state is going to adjust and inflate, that's only one portion of the overall funding. And so we would be precluding them from providing an appropriate cost adjustment in the other categories of funding. Now, if the state were entirely funding colleges, this would be a reasonable amendment, but it just ends up that the math doesn't work out that way. I would love it if we had sufficient resources that the state could fully fund our colleges, but at the end of the day, they have to raise tuition with inflation unless the state is willing through our funding to pick up that difference, which means they're going to be asking for a lot more from the state instead of from tuition. Now, I do have concerns, and I share the concerns of the fact that we want to keep tuition as low as possible. It's in the Constitution, and I think we've done a poor job, honestly, over the years of keeping our tuition as low as we want to keep it. Unfortunately, if we're not going to provide this augmented support from the state side, the hands of the community college districts are tied, and they have to provide that inflation. And most of them typically have slow plans that the commission adopts so that they know this is the inflation that's going to occur over the next few years, so that it's projected and expected based on what the actual inflation is. So those are the concerns that I have with the proposed amendment, even though I share the bringer's concerns for keeping tuition low, which we haven't done a bang-up job of.
Senator Summers.
Mr. Chairman, I don't necessarily think this amendment is necessary. I think if, as I think of what the Appropriation Committee would do, you would look at your revenue side. And if that's gone, you'd look at the inflationary pressure, you have that amount, you know what that is. And then you look at the revenue side and you see that that revenue's gone up, and then you can make a decision on whether you want to put more general fund in to make up that difference, or if there's more than, then you don't put anything. So I don't know that it's necessary for controlling of tuition. Likewise, I also agree with Senator Rothfuss and you, Senator Beitman, that, keeping tuition low is important.
Further discussion? Senator Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The way I look at it, it might increase the inflation that we have in tuition, because if the community college is looking at an increase in their power bill, and if they have an increase in their tuition, then they say, well, we can't then go ask for the supplemental request for that increase in our utilities. So therefore, we will just tack that on to the increase in tuition. So it seems to me that this amendment may make it so that tuition increases more rapidly, because we don't have a way for the colleges to come up with that other funding for their utilities and that sort of thing.
Let me say, I view this amendment really, I can see both sides of this argument. I do think it's important that we keep the tuition and fees for the community colleges as nearly free as possible. Now, technically, that language in the Constitution applies just to the University of Wyoming, but we have traditionally thought that, well, it ought to apply to the community colleges as well. They didn't. Nobody even had conceived of them as existing when they wrote the language for the Constitution. And it's a good principle, and I think it's stood us well. And I want to see an incentive to keep the tuition down, and I do think that's where this amendment is headed. My temptation is to put it in, and to that'll serve as a red flag for the committees during the session to see if we can come up with a better formulation that has been thought out, and give us a challenge to thinking it out. So I really have two minds about this amendment. I think it might be worthwhile at this point. I think it may be a little too much of a blunt instrument going forward, but I think we can refine it. So I don't have a strong recommendation. The committee vote your conscience on it.
Mr. Chairman, could we have the motion repeated? I just want to make sure I'm following
Also,
along.
can we read the motion back?
Mr. Chairman, we would ask Senator Beitman to read it back. We got the gist of it, but I didn't get it specifically, but.
Beitman, can you read it?
Absolutely, thanks. I just wrote down, the commission shall not be eligible for an external cost adjustment if tuition and fees were increased in the previous biennium.
LSO, did you have that specific language now?
We do. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Everybody understand the motion? All those in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Aye. Okay, I think it failed. Let's have a show of hands. All those in favor, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4. 5. Opposed? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, motion failed. That will be a topic to take up during the session, because I think we may be able to be creative with how we reach the objective of the motion and get something we can pass. Okay, any further discussion on the bill?
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question.
Senator Ellis.
Now that we're really looking at the words on the page, I'm looking at page 2, lines 19 and 20. It says an external cost adjustment authorized under this section may be submitted every 2 years commencing. If our intention is to have it only come during a budget year, do we want to make it clarify that it can only be brought during a budget year? Because I'm just trying to think of a scenario where if they didn't bring it during a budget year and they brought it during the supplemental, then they could start being on the supplemental cycle. And I just want to make sure I'm understanding, because I don't, that's my question, is if we wanted to tighten that up, if that's the intention of whoever's really leading this charge on this bill.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I can clarify that for
Okay.
Senator Ellis. The ECAs to be submitted for the standard budget that is submitted for the fiscal biennium beginning July 1st of 2024. So that'll be the 2025-26 biennium. That standard budget request will be submitted next interim, which will be the 2023 interim, and action would then be taken for the 2024 budget session.
Maybe this is a drafting question, but Mr. Chairman, that's I don't know that says that here.
Let me see if I understand. Is the concern that if we have a major inflation going on and have to submit an external cost adjustment request during the supplemental budget year for a general session, will that then automatically, this put us on a cycle that doesn't mesh with our budget session cycle?
Mr. Chairman, Senator Ellis, I agree that the language specifically on lines 14 through 22 does not specify that it's during the biennial budget request. However, the entire paragraph A is in contemplation of the standard budget. So if you look above, and I think in other places as well, but if you look above on line 5, it's the standard budget request. And there's another option, which is also the enrollment adjustment. And then as a secondary option, they can also request this external cost adjustment through their biennial budget request.
If we were to eliminate the sentence that starts on page 2, line 18, an external cost adjustment, et cetera, if we drop that sentence out of the bill, would that solve the problem and not do any real harm to the substance of the bill?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, that last sentence contemplates the information contained in subsection G. And so you need that directive that the external cost adjustment that's being recommended within the standard budget request contains the information in subsection G. And we have the dates in there to trigger that this is to be expected in their next biennial budget request, starting the next standard budget will be submitted in the 2023 interim.
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman, Senator Ellis, I think if you want to put it in there, I don't think it hurts anything, right? I think it's a good thing, like submitted every 2 years during the standard budget process.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We can move on from this, and if this advances, that may be an amendment we can tighten up down the road. But just wanted to get folks thinking. I just want to make sure I understand the intent.
I think if you remove just part of that sentence and put the as provided in subsection G into the first sentence, I think it'd work. But I think it works as it stands, so we can send it forward.
Mr. Chairman, I mean, if you look on page 2, lines 5 through 9, we talk about the budget, the fiscal binding commencing July 1 of 2020. That's on lines 7 and 8. We do the same thing on the enrollment adjustment for the fiscal binding. This is on lines 12 through 13 on the fiscal binding July 1, 2018. So we're mirroring that same language above in this subsection A to reflect that the ECA, we're expecting the commission to provide the information as requested in subsection G to begin for this next fiscal biennium, their new biennial budget request.
Mr. Chairman, when LSO explains it that way, I do think that standard budget request and then having this 2-year language, I think it's fine and we can noodle on it if there needs to be more changes. But I think the concern is that we just don't want to see ECA request every year. So I think we leave it as is, and then if we need to revisit it, we can. But now that I see that, I think it's fine as it is.
Okay, any further on this bill? Discussion? Okay, that the committee introduced this bill as amended, because we did that one amendment, did carry. So seeing no further discussion, call the roll, please.
Mr. Chairman, on 23 LSO-0239, Community College Funding Inflation Adjustment as amended. Senator Beitman? Senator Ellis? Senator Rothfuss? Senator Salazar? Representative Andrew? Representative Brown? Is excused. Representative Connolly? Representative Harshman? Representative Nyman? Representative Newsom? Representative Obermueller? Representative Summers? Co-Chairman Paxton? Chairman Scott? You have 10 ayes, 3 noes, and 1 excused.
Yeah, we'll leave that one open. Okay. Okay, is he going to show up today, or is he?
No, but he was going to send in a proxy.
Okay, I guess we can tolerate that. Committee, we were scheduled to have a break. We're a few minutes past 10. My instinct, unless somebody petitions otherwise, is to do the Wyoming Tomorrow Scholarship Appropriation 23 LSO 240 now and take a break after that. Is that acceptable to the committee?
Mr. Chairman, I think this one will take some time. There is a substantial amendment. I believe Mr.
Okay,
Representative
we'll take a
Harshman's-
break now. Be back.
Page 2 on slide 3. And as I stated, the staff comment notes that minimum balance of $50 million is required prior to the award of any scholarships. And recall in 2022, the legislature appropriated $10 million from the LISRA that will be effective July 1st of 2023 to the endowment fund. This act is effective July 1st of 2023. That can be found on page 3, line 4.
Okay. Committee, any questions on the bill, technical questions of the drafting of the bill before us? Seeing none. Community College Commission would like for y'all to come forward and speak to the bill as it's before us now, and I will ask you and the public again, if we get an extensive amendment, to speak to it, speak to that. Okay, Community College Commission.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair, members of the committee, I'm Sandy Caldwell, Executive Director of the Wyoming Community College Commission. As you know, this is one of the priorities for the Community College Commission. It was a part of the statewide educational attainment plan for Wyoming. And it serves not only community college students, because this is the adult learners, just as a reminder of that, it's also University of Wyoming. So students are eligible for both of those institutions based on the legislation that was passed last year. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to Commissioner Blickery, because he has some points he would like to make.
Mr. Chairman, all of you, I was going to say committee members. So all of you, it's a real honor for me to be here today. Some of you I was lucky enough to be able to serve with here. One of the things I'm most proud of from our legislature is that you folks came up with the Wyoming's Tomorrow funding program and gave us an opportunity to move forward. I am somebody who went to college as an older student because I served in the Navy in Vietnam before, and then I was lucky enough to be able to have the GI Bill as a funding source and then work and get through college. Most of the people that go to community colleges and many of the people that go to the University of Wyoming can afford to go to those schools because that's where they live and work. But they can't afford to drop everything in order to get a better life for themselves going forward with a new degree. So your Wyoming's Tomorrow funding doesn't fund the University of Wyoming, and it doesn't fund the community colleges. What it funds is regular people who need help so they can improve themselves. And in other words, once they improve themselves, they can improve our state because they stay here. They go to school where they live and they stay here. So your Wyoming's Tomorrow program is fabulous, and we are really happy. Okay, so as soon as you came out with that thing, we have a small staff, but they are hardworking, and we started right away. We formed committees, lots of committees, and had lots of meetings to write the rules, and we've written the rules, worked on them over and over and over, approved them through the commission in October, and now they're ready to go to public comment. From public comment, we'll see where we go from there. Now, the next important thing here is we need $50 million so that we can fund students and go towards the future of this state. We need that as fast as possible. So we thank you for this bill. Thank you very much. And you know, we're happy that you guys are looking at the future of our students and that you're looking at the future of the people who live here in our state. Thank you.
Questions? Again, the public, you're welcome to comment at this point, or we're going to have an extensive amendment, and I will seek general public comment on that before we vote on it. Representative Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I guess the question I would have for the commission, and really, you know, it was the motion I had to have a match in there. I think the match is too robust, right? Do you think there's any way we could do a one-to-one match and never get to ever get to our 50 million? So that's the question I'm asking you. Because I'm sure you've been asking, your partners out there, is there, yeah. So could you speak to the match?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Summers, it is important for this bill to move forward. I do think the match will be incredibly difficult. One of the challenges, whether or not donating to this endowment would be a charitable gift, and that is something that we're researching. It is very complicated in general. Donations to state funds like this are not considered charitable gifts. I don't have the official legal on that, but that certainly creates a challenge in order to meet a one-to-one match, in that they don't get some sort of benefit for making sure that they're investing in the state in this way. So it's hard.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I know there's a substantial amendment coming, but I do believe in a match of some kind. And is $1 million too much of a match?
You want to take that one?
Representative Summers, first, if you'd explain to me what you mean $1 million is, do you mean one gift of $1 million has to come from somebody, or do you mean a total of $1 million match against the rest?
Mr. Chairman, my idea would be whatever the general fund, the money that we appropriate out of the general fund would not go into the endowment until $1 million match from somewhere was received, either cumulatively or as one individual match.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Summers, that is doable. We will find the people if we have to get 100,000 of us to give a small amount.
All right, thank you.
Well, that's a very easy amendment to draw. You simply increase the appropriation on page 1, line 12, general fund, and decrease the match and change that one-to-one language. So keep that in mind. I don't know whether the extensive amendment will cover that or not, but any further on this? Further on this? Anybody else on this? Ms. Taylor.
Mr. Chairman, again, my name is Erin Taylor, Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of Community College Trustees. Again, we're gracious that this bill is being discussed. We did the hard work to get the bones moving forward. The commission's done the really hard work of writing the rules, and we'll see what public comment brings. To the question at hand as to is the one-to-one match realistic, if I might address that. The voice that we don't have here today because of what's going on in Laramie with the Wyoming Business Alliance is the voice of business. I am a member of the Wyoming Business Alliance. I'm the former chairman, but Cindy Delancey and her crew have been researching that, and they are working with a legal team to look at what that involves. And I know visiting with members that are involved in the legislative space and the state budget office as well. If it's simply just a gift to the state of Wyoming, this is where I think it's headed, Mr. Chairman. If it's simply a gift, the incentive is likely not there from the business community to do that. But if it's at the scale that's written in the bill right now, if it's changed to something along the lines of $1 million, I believe there might be some opportunity out there. And that does include other charitable organizations as well, as is permissive in the bill. I do have, Mr. Chairman, trustee here from Laramie County Community College who wanted to share just a few thoughts on their experience with this type of program. And Mr. Erickson is here, Trustee Erickson is here to share some of that with your permission as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and co-chair and members of the committee. There's been many times that I wanted to come before you and say some things about, oh, I'm sorry, my name is Don Erickson. I happen to be a trustee from Laramie County Community College and also a director on the Wyoming Association of Community College Trustees. Been on the board of the state organization for 8 years and 10 years as a trustee. And I noticed that you folks are doing a marvelous job, I think, in becoming more and more aware about our needs at the community colleges. And I want to thank you for that. In my 10 years at LCCC, we had the opportunity to have a pilot that really is the model for Wyoming tomorrow. And that was Rediscover LCCC. And we had this started with a funding by the El Bogan Foundation. And we had 2018, I believe, is when we started this. We had 3 cohorts, about 200 students were able to do that. I could tell you the demand was great. We had many more applicants than we had the opportunity to fund. And so when you all start talking about what you're going to do with this particular bill and the amendments forward, I urge you to try and get the funding for the endowment as quick as possible, because there's a major demand out there. And the areas that were really, I would say, in high demand with our cohorts back in the last couple of years was in the health sciences, business, and information technology. So I'll keep it brief. Thank you for your consideration to get this money for the endowment up as quick as you can, because there's a high demand all across the entire state. Thank you.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay. Committee, we're going to go next to the amendment. We'll move the bill afterwards, but we'll deal with the amendment first and go back to public testimony once we've heard the amendment. Okay. Representative Harshman.
Well, thank you, Chairman Scott. Members in LSO appreciate their work in drafting this and distributing it to you. Basically deletes the section 1 and the match portion. I think you've heard the issue. I mean, this money really came from Wyoming businesses. I mean, it appeared really from our energy companies. We have about, just under 3 billion surplus projected here in the next 6 months in the LSRA, 3 billion, 2.9 plus billion, be the largest LSRA in our history. And again, most of that's come from our energy industry. So I think really, Mr. Chairman, it's kind of what we did with the Hathaway back in our last real boom with natural gas is, and we've become really good at this, is to take these booms and invest them permanently so they have permanent benefit without growing government. The whole idea, we don't want to create future burdens for future taxpayers. And so by endowing this kind of thing, it's really important. I think we've all, we're all on board. The committee passed the bill last year. I mean, other states are doing this. We're one of the last to get to it. I think the LCCC program has proven that. So it's not about the bill itself, but it's how to get it going. And so we have this 2.9 billion in the LSRA. Your CapFin committee last week saved about 300 million of it in the permanent mineral reserve account. And we're trying to move all of our reserve accounts into a total return investment strategy. So we're trying to save some serious money, save 340 million of the school surplus into the school reserve account. And so really what we'd like to do is this amendment, Mr. Chairman, is just take this 100 million. We appropriated 10 million last year, add to that 10 with 90, make the corpus 100 million. That's what the original plan was. That'll serve, then that'll serve with us about 690 new students a year and have a cohort of about 1,300. We heard LCCC had 300 right out of the gate. I mean, the demand is there, and we've heard from Western Wyoming and others. So the demand will be there. The bill has a 5% spending policy in it already, so that's already taken care of. And then the second part, Mr. Chairman, of this amendment. So you can see on the amendment on the back side of it, on section 2, 15 million from the LSRA to the expenditure account, and then 90 million, which will join that 10 million the legislature's already appropriated for the 100 million endowment. And why 15 million in the expenditure account? This, again, goes with this CAPFIN policy of having these larger reserve accounts so we can put all this money into a total return policy and not have this huge chunk of money sitting in just cash where it's not really drawing any interest. And with all our reserve accounts, it's over $1 billion. That's really not working for us. And so we want to get this money working. And so that's why to have this large reserve out of the gate, so it can be invested like the rest of our permanent funds we hope are going to be invested after this legislative session in this long-term policy. And so make our money work hard. For example, your CAPFIN, just on that 640 million we saved, it's going to grow and allow all these gigantic reserve accounts, which will be nearly $1.5 billion now, to be invested in a total return policy instead of just a cash reserve that's real liquid. Nearly 100 million a year in opportunity costs over the last 5 years. So that's you're going to see big movements to save a lot of this money and not spend it. And so, Mr. Chairman, that's really what we're trying to do here. We're going to have this one-time chance. I think Wyoming, we've become experts in this, whether it was doubling the permanent mill trust fund and doubling it again. Common school accounts doubled. The Hathaway has grown from 400 million to almost 700 million. And I think this thing will continue to grow. And then I guess I thought Commissioner Blickery, former representative, said it best, and I wrote down that note. This isn't funding the community colleges. It's under that in our agenda, but really it's about people. It's funding people. And 85% of them we see are going to be women, and about 2/3 of that 85% have children. And it's about changing family trees. That's what this is about, and changing our state. And we're not the first state to do it. We're one of the last states to do it. And so I really appreciate this committee, the work you've done. It's been a real teamwork thing to pass this thing, first of all. And now I think we lead by say, hey, we're going to take a portion of this 2.9 billion LSRA and put it to work forever without growing government. So that's my speech on it, Mr. Chairman. And I hope if there's any questions about any specific parts, you can see the dates were changed and all that as we rolled out on the bill, but that doesn't change really the subject of the bill. It'll be a 2.5% spend the first year, and then it will roll into the 5% spending policy in years after that. So that's really it, Mr. Chairman. Any questions?
That's moved as a second.
Is there a second? Yeah.
Second.
Thank you, Mr.
Mueller. Okay. Senator Office.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of questions about the mechanism. I was actually under the original impression that the $10 million that was already appropriated was a portion of what's here, but is this 90 plus 15 plus the 10 that's there?
Mr. Chairman, yes.
Okay. So I misunderstood originally, but thank you. That's
115 total.
Total.
100
Thank
in
you.
the corpus and 15 in the expenditure reserve account.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question on the bottom of page 1 and striking out the 9% and making that be 21%. Can you describe that whole process to me?
Mr. Chairman? Yeah, Representative Newsom, thanks for that question. And really that is that total return by having a larger reserve account. And so really what we're calling this in CAPFIN, as a 5X or a 5-year reserve account, this will really be a little larger than a 5X reserve account. And so that's really what that is. So we can move all these reserve accounts into this total return policy and not have to be in liquid cash. So that doesn't increase the spend. That's already controlled in the bill. It's a 5% spending policy on the bill that we passed last year. But this is just the size of the reserve in case we have a downturn in markets and all those things. Thank you for the question.
So, Mr. Chairman, it looks like a tip threshold. I mean, it says it says the state treasurer shall transfer monies from the expenditure account to the endowment fund when, within the expenditure account, when they are in excess of 21%. So it's a tip, right? It's a tip threshold. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, it is a tip threshold, but remember, that's not so important anymore because with this larger threshold, it's going to be invested exactly like the corpus. It's going to be all in a total return, long-term policy. By having a larger reserve, we're able to do that. And that's through all our work on CapFin, RVK, all our consultants, we've arrived at this we've been working at this for years to try to get our money working harder for us. And we have this, so that's all that is. It's a tip threshold, but it's going to continue to grow. That expenditure, it says expenditure account, but it's an expenditure really / reserve account. You're not going to expend all that each year. The 5% is 5 million. The 21% would be 21 million. So.
For discussion. Let me say, and I do support this, and let me explain a little bit why. We have, in other states, I've seen when they get good fortunes, they instantly increase their government expenditures, and then it comes back and bites them when the revenue goes down. We have a much more volatile revenue source with our minerals, and right now the price of our minerals is quite high. I think with the results of the election, it's probably going to stay quite high for a couple years, if not a little longer. And what we've developed is a strategy of taking the large revenues we get at that point and socking them away for future purposes. We did that with the initial Hathaway, as Representative Harshman will recall. He was on House Education in those days, and they came up with putting a large amount from the school finances into the Hathaway so they wouldn't be spent, would be a benefit long term, and that has worked. It's been a very successful strategy for dealing with the kind of volatile revenue source that we've got. So this is entirely in line with what we've successfully done in the past. And the question in my mind becomes what we're trying to achieve with this, which is a scholarship program for people who didn't take advantage of the Hathaway often because they went to work, went into the service, needed to grow up a little bit and went into work, and then come back and having grown up, they need the extra education to advance economically and meet our workforce needs and improve their own family income. So I think this is I've seen it in other states. It's a great benefit to a lot of the hardworking people of the state. And so I think the objective here is well worthwhile, and I think this is the mechanism, and with the information we're getting as to what our surplus looks like, this is the way to go about it. So I urge the committee to adopt the amendment. Now, anybody in the public want to add to that? Speak to that? Community College Commission.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Sandy Caldwell, Executive Director, Community College Commission. And I do want to address this because Representative Harshman brings up a very important point about the number of people that will be impacted directly. First off, the rules are ready to go. You make this change, we are ready to deliver that. They are for open comment. We expect the commission will adopt the final rules in February. So it will be ready to launch should you proceed with this. The second thing that I want to bring up is we have some really hard data now on the effectiveness this would have. You heard from Trustee Erickson about the Laramie County Community College program, but the L. Bogan Foundation really took a bold step, and they funded the community colleges for this demographic from last year and this year, and the results are outstanding. It is quite remarkable. The individuals are people who are already living in our communities. They are there, they are working. The majority of them have children. The majority of them are low-income working adults. And we definitely hit the gender. The data on this was really remarkable about the number of women with low income who needed this. What's really, really encouraging about this data, and we can provide the report for you, it's actually public information, is that their persistence, their retention into the next semester, and their performance was higher. So the impact was very, very powerful in what this did to individuals, allowing them to complete school and allowing them to go to work. And they did so at a much higher performance rate. So their GPAs are higher compared to the control group. So it was very, very effective. And we have some really hard data across all 7 of the, and actually 8 community colleges. The students are enrolled at Gillette through the Northern, but it in fact impacted all of those students, and they consumed all of those dollars. The need is great. They had more need than they had funding from the Elbogen Scholarship. So it's quite powerful, and should you move forward with the amendment, the commission and its rules are ready that we wrote, as you heard from Commissioner Blickery, with a great, powerful team, small and mighty, that included the colleges, the commission, and the University of Wyoming. And if I may, Commissioner Blickery.
Mr. Chairman and committee, the sooner that we can get students taking classes and going towards advanced degrees, the better it is economically for Wyoming, because we have people who can fit the needs that we're going to be seeing in the future. And these are people who are going to be educated here at the university or educated here at our community colleges, and they're going to stay here, and they're going to be the people that support the future economy of Wyoming. So this isn't just a savings for saving money. This is a savings for the entire future of our state. You guys, the legislature pointed out to us that we need a huge amount more people with advanced degrees. And we don't even graduate enough kids from all our high schools so that every one of them got a bachelor's degree that we could meet the goals that you've set for us. We need adults to advance the degrees that they have and the certificates and be able to support the future of economy, whatever that might be in Wyoming. So the sooner that you can fund this, our staff and our people, all these ones behind you that are looking at you, worked really hard to get these rules ready because of your foresight to get us where we are. So that's what I feel about this. Thank you.
Anybody else? Ms. Taylor.
Mr. Chairman, I thought you wanted to hear from me one more time. So I got back up here. Again, my name is Erin Taylor, Executive Director of the Wyoming Association of Community College Trustees. Agree with everything that's been said. You know the value. We passed that bill last year. The Elbogen information that Dr. Caldwell presented is powerful, and I think I remember saying this on the Senate hearing during the legislative session. This is one of the most exciting bills that I've ever worked on in my entire career. And so the opportunity to make change in our state is tremendous with this. It's a legacy that you all can really say that you were a part of, and I'm proud to be a part of that as well. But I wanted to remind you of that really long list of industry and businesses that supported this, because Cindy's across the hill over in Laramie, and a lot of her folks are en route to Laramie to attend the Wyoming Business Alliance. I think we had something like 15, 20 industry group supporting this. These are the folks who need these people in their industries, in their jobs, in their businesses. And so I just wanted to remind you of that. And, you know, everything that I do for the colleges is for the students. Sometimes it is for the institutions themselves, but this is truly for the people. And I'm just really excited to be a part of that. So, Mr. Chairman, subject to your questions, that's all I have for you today.
Very much. Anybody else? Anybody else? Public testimony is closed. Well, we'll vote the amendment and then we'll move the bill. We're going to do it this time. Okay.
It's backwards, but.
That's fine. Question is on the amendment. Any further discussion on the amendment? Representative Constance.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm in favor of the amendment. Admittedly, when I got the materials for the meeting and I read over the draft bill, I thought to myself, this is good, but it doesn't go far enough. And in my mind, I had 2 additional amendments to the bill that was out there, either fully funding or decreasing the amount that was needed before we could start doing awards. I didn't like either of them. And then I heard about this particular amendment and thought to myself, boy, that goes so outside of the box and takes care of not only one issue, but 2. You know, the one issue is we need to effectuate this right away. And how do we do it? But the second is we are not making the enormous amount of money that we have in savings and in reserves work for us in the way that we should. And what this does is allow for us to actually have more money available for programs like this and others in the state. And so I think that this is an amendment that is second to none, in all honesty, in thinking about getting a good program for people in the state and thinking about the future in terms of having funds available. So again, on and in favor, and thank you to the good former Chair of Appropriations for bringing it before us.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, on and for the amendment. And I remember when this was really started in the form of a task force. And there's some of the committee that was on that task force, but many of you weren't. And I think the testimony that we received in that task force from both community colleges and individuals that are adults that need a helping hand to be able to basically lift their lives, right? I mean, I think it's a pretty incredible program, and it is really a savings, right? We're savings and we're just using some of that money maybe in a different way than we would have if it was stuck in the LISRA or if it was stuck in the general fund or something. So I really do believe it's a great opportunity for the state of Wyoming to ultimately get more workers from Wyoming that will stay in Wyoming. And I think that's the key, right? We worry about this brain drain we have out of Wyoming with our young people, but these are adults that are in Wyoming. Chances are they're going to stay here. They've built a life here. I think it's an incredible opportunity, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, again, appreciate all the conversation and appreciate your support. And again, I just think this is something that I think the executive branch, the legislative branch, we can all rally around and start the session and really make a significant step forward. So appreciate you. Thank you.
Okay. Further? Okay, the question is on the amendment. You've all seen a copy of it. Yeah?
Can we move the bill first and then put the amendment on it? Just as a matter of process, I like the standard procedure of move a bill, then amend it. I'm old school.
Got you trained, we'll do the amendments first.
What's that?
I say I haven't yet got you trained on that one yet. If it bothers you, go ahead and move the bill.
All right, I'll move the bill.
Second.
Excellent. And then there's probably an amendment to move?
Yeah, and the amendment is.
I'll move the amendment.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Okay, it seems to bother some of the colleagues. Now, the question is on the amendment. Any further discussion on the amendment? All those in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Show of hands. Ayes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Opposed? 3. Okay, amendment carried.
Mr. Chairman.
Back on the bill.
So, Mr. Chairman, I know we have a good thing here, but I still think that if we have some kind of match in it, it helps sell it to our colleagues. And I also think it puts the onus back on the private or non-public funding sources to show that this is in fact a good thing. And so with that, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion that we include $1 million of matching funds from any private or non-public funding source. In other words, you have to have that in place prior to the,
How would you word that? Where would it?
well, it would have went in the original bill really nicely. Now that that's all carved off, Mr. Chairman, it's a conceptual amendment that this money can't be, scholarships can't be utilized until the $1 million of private or non-public funding source has been secured. That's what my amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It hasn't been seconded, so maybe it's pointless.
I have a question as to where that funding would go. Would it go into the corpus or would it go into the expenditure account?
So, Mr. Chairman, good question, because, it would have been on page 2, on page 2 on line 2 and 3, and so that is into the endowment fund. So until the 1 million hits the endowment fund, you can't spend scholarships out.
Okay. That's satisfactory? Who's the second over here? That's satisfactory? Yes. Satisfactory with the, okay, that's the motion.
Mr. Chairman, just
Senator Ellis.
as a technical.
No,
Tanya.
it's
Yeah,
Tanya, I'm sorry.
Just as a technical question, neither one of the appropriations would be effective until the $1 million is received. Is that the intent of the motion? So the 100, the 90 million and the 15 million to the expenditure account are contingent upon receipt of the 100 or
No,
the 1 million?
Mr. Chairman? No, for technical correction, the 100 million would go into the endowment account, but you wouldn't spin off scholarships until you received the $1 million of public match or public and private and non-public match into it. So the money would go into the endowment. The 100 million would go into the endowment. It would not spin off scholarships until you received the $1 million match.
Okay.
And just discussion, Mr. Chairman, just on and against. I think, some of the industries that we're looking at funding are nursing. And, I think we assume that we're going to have these big businesses that are going to come in and start investing money into this. And I just don't think it's all going to kind of match or come out in the wash, so to say. I think that we just need to focus on investing in our people. That's what the commitment is that I see with the amendment we just passed. And I think this just clouds it. I think it delays it. And then I just think it muddies the water. So I would urge a no on this.
The trigger in there was a certain of costs in a major scholarship. And there's no point in doing it until we had enough available to make it worthwhile. If this bill passes, we'll have the money there. And I don't see a real need for the matching, this level of matching. It really just amounts to a nuisance. I think we can see the benefits well enough to say that once we've achieved putting this amount of money in there, why garbage it up with the matching requirement? It's not like something we're saying we can't justify enough public money to get it done, so we'll require a match. which is some things we've done at the, on some of the, for instance, university athletic programs, or we've done it with the university, trying to increase their endowment because it's an effective fundraising tool. This one doesn't raise enough to meet that test, I think. And my memory is that there is a structure in the bill as passed that we put in, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, we put in a bit that gives an industry that matches some of the funds for scholarships, some priority in getting those scholarships done. So there is that kind of a matching requirement in the bill to start with, as passed. So I think this one is just one step too far. So on and against the proposed amendment.
Representative Knight. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that and what you just shared, sir, but the reality of it is out here in the real world where we deal with this, in my mind, I appreciate Mr. Summers, Representative Summers' desire to put something in there that is going to require, and while I also appreciate Representative Harshman's statement that we've already gotten this money from business and industry. But the truth of it is if industry, and we've just heard testimony, is that they want and desire this, they need these people. If they need them, then many times they'll pay for them. I think of Wyotech. We don't hear much out of Wyotech or what they do or what they accomplish over the hill. But that facility pays taxes. That facility goes out and beats the brush like you guys do too, but from what I'm gathering, an enormous scale. And that whole thing is driven on the fact that they work with industry to make sure that industry has a major stake in this, to give them the incentive to go after those kids. And to me, $1 million it's a token idea, like we've already heard, $1 million. They'll get 100,000 folks together and do that. I mean, that's not a big deal. But I get really hesitant about the idea of saying we're really flush, and I do appreciate putting it away. I mean, that's a great idea, and we've seen we live on 20% or more of our income comes from investment income. But I get really hesitant about the idea that while we're flush, here's free money. That's just, industry doesn't really have to do anything beyond just continue to operate. We'll take our taxes from you and put it in this, and you don't have to, even though you are desperate for the people that this would turn out. Now, I've supported this before because I like the results, and I would love to hear Ms. Caldwell's results. Again, I am actually more encouraged by this particular scholarship than I am the Hathaway, based on the information we got from the Wyoming Department of Education of actually how many certificates and diplomas come out of Hathaway earners versus the Tomorrow Scholarship owners. But personally, I do support the idea that there is some skin in the game. And if my folks back home are going to support this, they need to know that it's not just, there you go. I think it's good. I think it's good for folks to have to come to the table and say, hey, we're going to go out and we're going to scrap because you appreciate it more. And I guess I'm a little concerned about how much free money there is out there. And that it kind of de-incentivizes sometimes work. When I can just get free money, there's just free money flowing. We've just got it everywhere right now. And while I'm glad that we are in a great position right now with our oil and gas, I recall very clearly about 2 years ago, we cut $458 million from our budget because things were not good at that time. So there are going to be a lot of other entities that are going to come to this legislature, and they're going to desperately want help as well. And this is a pretty good chunk of this, and a lot of that is forecast. And those dollars are not actually in the bank. And so also a consideration. So I appreciate Representative Summers' willingness to do this, even if it is what would be just a token effort here to put some skin in the game. I don't think $1 million is too much to ask to get this thing rolling if there's going to be $115 million sitting in there to go to work. So, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I understand the purpose and the desire to to get the sort of symbolic support of industry, but I'm on and against the proposed amendment. I think that, again, this is the people's money of the state of Wyoming. This is a substantial amount of money from the additional revenue, and this money is in the bank. This is in Lisbon now as of the close of the fiscal year. It's up about $500 million from what it was when we, not the 2 billion, well, it's at about 2 billion, just shy of 2 billion, I think, right now. So this is new revenue. We actually have this bill covered. There's projections that we're talking about, but we've got about 400 in excess, I think, of what we see here available. And when you think about the fact that it's not our money, it's not the legislature's money, it's the people of the state of Wyoming's money. And for us to say, well, industry, you're going to have to pony up $1 more million. We appreciate the $500 million that you put forward for the people of the state of Wyoming, and the next couple of billion that we're probably going to see over the next few years. Thanks for that too. But if you could just give us $1 more million, then we'd educate some folks for you. I just don't like that message. It's not our money. We're not in a position where we should be withholding it from good use by the people of Wyoming. We talked a lot about this program. This is an exceptional program, and it meets a real need that industry has identified, and the people of the state of Wyoming, our citizens, have identified. It's a need. We have a unique opportunity at this time to meet that need. I don't think we have to go out with our hat one more time and say, just a little bit more, and we'll give you this really shiny thing. We know it's needed. We have the resources to provide. It's a good time to do it. It will be very helpful, and it will help to support the education and industry of the state. So I don't think we need the amendment. I really appreciate the bill as structured at this point in time, and hope we just move it forward.
The amendment. That would require $1 million in match. So all those in favor of the amendment, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Noes have it. Amendment has failed. We're back on the bill. The question is, any further discussion? The question is, shall the committee sponsor the bill as amended for the coming general session? Roll call vote. LSO, take the roll, please.
Mr. Chairman, on 23 LSO-0240, Wyoming Tomorrow's Scholarship Program Appropriation as amended. Senator Beitman.
No.
Senator Ellis. Aye. Senator Rothfuss.
Aye.
Senator Salazar.
No.
Representative Andrew.
Aye.
Representative Brown.
Excused.
He has left a vote of aye. Representative Connolly. Representative Harshman. Representative Nyman.
No.
Representative Newsom. Representative Overmueller.
Aye.
Co-Chairman Paxton.
Aye.
Chairman Scott.
Aye.
You have 10 ayes.
I'm an aye too.
11 ayes. I apologize. 11 ayes and 3 noes.
11 ayes and 3 no. Okay, that one is adopted. The next,
Before we go on there, maybe, I think the Community College Commission had some more comments. I believe you, Dr. Caldwell.
okay, Co-Chairman Paxton informs me the community colleges have a few more remarks to make before we go on. Very briefly.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Co-Chair, members of the committee, we did have commissioners here today, and Vice Chair of the commission is Megan Getz, and she would like to address the first topic from this morning, which is the Wyoming Innovations Partnership.
Good morning, or maybe it's afternoon now. My name is Megan Getz. I'm from Laramie, and I have been on the commission for about a year. And when I was asked to serve on the commission, I was curious as to why, because I'm not in, my profession's not education. My day job is as an attorney, and my passion is really in economic development and having my kids have the opportunity to stay in Wyoming and work here. And what you all just did with Wyoming's Tomorrow is the fundamental block for WIP. And I just wanted to let you know that from the inception of when I started serving on the commission, WIP was a priority for us. It was an agenda item that we gave serious consideration to. And the intersection, truly, that I see in private sector of clients that I represent, as well as having served on the Business Council for 6 years and now the Community College Commission, between really the opportunities to advance our state from an economic perspective and train the workforce to do so is incredible. There probably, in my experience, is no greater intersection. So I just wanted to let the commission know that as a priority and since its inception and the longevity of the WIP program, we've been able to really make strides and provide the programs that what you just did with Wyoming's Tomorrow is truly going to have an opportunity to change this state. I believe it. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we will proceed to the K-12 student expulsion suspension. We've got Department of Education on the data on this, so if they would come forward. And then the plan is, after lunch, we will deal with the legislation in this area. Okay.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Wanda Maloney. I am the Chief Policy Officer at the Wyoming Department of Education, and I am here with Shelley Hamill. Shelley is the Chief Academic Officer at the Department of Education. We're here to provide information about the data that we collect at the department, the monitoring and the data reviews that occur in relation to special education, and then finally, ongoing training and professional development. In September, we brought forward to you information around expulsion and suspension, and this is further data that we collect in the Wyoming Department of Education 636 report, and this data is collected at the end of the school year. It meets a couple of requirements, one of students and incidents related to crime and violence that occur throughout the year, and it also meets federal requirements of those incidents, along with the Safe and Gun-Free Schools Act information. When we look at the expulsion data then really is K through 12 students, and it's collected from districts in 4 categories. The first category would be those students who are IDEA students, and then those students who are not IDEA students, and then students who are provided services during an expulsion, and then those who are not provided services. In terms of data that we collect at the department, we do not collect information around expulsions according to race, and we also do not collect information on the number of incidents at an individual student level in comparison to the total number of expulsions that occur. What we do have for you is data on suspensions, which really impact our IDEA students with disabilities. And that is collected in terms of race, and then also the comparison between the numbers of students who have incidences and then those that receive a suspension. So the second page of our memo provides the graph, which breaks down that information for you. And at this point, I will turn it over to Chief Shelley Hamill to provide additional information about the chart, and then also to walk you through some of the information regarding monitoring and data reviews that happen around this data.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
and committee members. As noted, I am Shelley Hamill. I'm with the Wyoming Department of Education. So we'll start with the table. The table is going to represent the suspension data that we have for school year, 3 different school years, school year 2018-19 through school year 2020-21. And you'll note that on the left column of the chart, we have that annual data broken down by race, the demographic of race. Moving across the columns, column A identifies the number of in-school IDEA suspensions for each category. Column B identifies the number of out-of-school IDEA suspensions, where column C identifies the total number of IDEA suspensions, so both in-school and out-of-school suspensions. Column D is the total IDEA number of students enrolled for that school year and by that subgroup or that specific demographic breakdown. You'll notice the next column is identified as a ratio of column C, so the total number of IDEA suspensions when compared to D, the total IDEA number of students identified for that year. And it represents that, of course, as a ratio or a percentage. Column E are the approximate number of IDEA students with 1 or more suspensions. Again, the next column is again a ratio, so the average of column E, or the approximate number of IDEA students with 1 or more suspensions, in comparison to D, which is the total number of students for that year. And then column F is an approximate number of IDEA removals. I'll pause there. Mr. Chairman, an IDEA removal is identified on the data collection, the WDE 636. It's kind of a catch-all. So this report is aligned with both some state and some federal reporting regulations. You'll notice the footnote at the bottom, number 2. And so in that data collection, a removal is defined, and it is defined as suspensions, so both in school and out of school. It can be defined as an expulsion, an experience where a student is placed in an interim alternative educational setting, and that can be triggered by school personnel or by a hearing officer. So it kind of is a collection of a lot of different types of removals from the general environment. Okay, any other questions?
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman, thank you. You know, obviously this is a federal reporting, right? This is federal reporting. So how do we stand when you look at, you know, our percentage hasn't changed much, right? Suspensions to the total number of IDEA enrollment. So my question is, you know, in 2018, 2019, 9.4, then it goes to 11.2, back down to 10.3. So it seems like there's just some variability. It's not an upward trend. But that percentage, do you have any idea where Wyoming sits with other states? Is that a good percentage? I mean, 10%'s a lot. You know, I realize this is, you know, the IDEA students are probably in that risk category anyway, obviously. But is that, how would we sit with other states? Are we doing a good job or a bad job?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Summers, that's a great question. When we look at our data compared to other states, we often see a ranking, but not necessarily a clear picture, as we reported, I think in September, that we're unsure of the percentages necessarily. When we are able to find some by looking at other state departments' postings or reports that they've provided for their legislative bodies, we look very similar. Okay, so I want to point out that the WDE Special Education Division is responsible for monitoring and data reviews specific to the provision of FAPE, or a free and appropriate public education for qualifying students. Part of this monitoring is then to look at data that would indicate what is called significant disproportionality. So that is when districts either identify, place in more restrictive settings, or discipline children from any racial or ethnic group at a markedly higher rate than their peers. The threshold for this when reporting is 5% higher than the state average for that specific subgroup. So when that occurs, when we see that threshold broken by the reporting from any district, the WDE Special Education Monitoring Team schedules a monitoring event with that specific school district. What they do then is they go in and monitor, and they're looking at the school district's policies and procedures. They'll look at the specific students that are identified in that specific demographic subgroup at their IEPs and their disciplinary records. And the question that they're trying to answer then is, were the policies and procedures applied fairly and appropriately to each student's situation and across the district in all settings with all students? And on occasion, we do find that a district might have a higher than that 5% state average for a specific student subgroup, but through that monitoring visit, we have not found any district to be in violation of their policies and procedures.
Representative Connolly.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Hamel, how many districts have you visited because of being outside that 5%?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Connolly, for the last 3 years that this data represents, there was one school district that identified. Previous to that, I believe that maybe the previous 5 years before that, there was one as well. And both were found to be compliant with their policies and procedures.
Proceed.
I think on the final part of our memo, we will just provide with you some information that we give to districts around training. The first would be training that happens from special education around the expulsion and suspension disciplinary practices, and that goes on an annual basis. The type of training is provided. We have also stood up a multi-tiered system of support center. This center does a variety of things. It really looks at behavioral components and academic. And tier 1 would be practices that they would implement for all students. Tier 2 would be looking at specialized students who need additional support after that tier 1 is administered. And then tier 3 would be some special cases or students who just need more supports or interventions in place. And you can see there's a number of topics that we've provided trainings on. When we piloted this program and this support, we had 9 districts that were involved in this, engaging 15 schools. And then recently in the statewide training that was provided, there were 14 districts. So over the last couple of years, we've had 23 districts who have been involved in this professional development.
I get my mic to work. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question on the MTSS. Is that a federal kind of requirement or push, or is this more of a state? Or is this just a voluntary thing the department under previous superintendents have set up and thought was a good idea? I guess I don't remember us passing a bill to fund this, or, thank you.
I'm not aware that it's a federal requirement. I don't believe it is. It's something that aligns with best practices and research. And it also gives those educators an opportunity to be trained in looking at interventions that support students in all tiers, whether you're looking at academic issues, whether you're looking at behavioral issues. But I would ask Chief Hamel to add any additional information if she has any.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Harshman, it is not a federal requirement. As Wanda pointed out, it is a best practice. That early intervention concept is really critical, as you know, to make sure that we intervene early to course correct if a child or a student is starting down a path that isn't going to be beneficial for them long-term. I think typically people will often think about MTSS as a special education kind of concept or construct because of PBIS, behavioral intervention supports that were really kind of focused often around students that had already been identified as students with a disability or a qualifying category in the 13 different federal identification areas. But it really is best served as a tier 1 start with MTSS for that early intervention for all students.
And Mr. Chairman, this is kind of, and we can leave this question, you can think about it if you come back for the next bill, but I'm really interested. So you've got this policy that you're currently doing, these trainings you're doing. We have a bill that's going to require you to come out with a draft set of new rules, right? Or a new process, develop model rules and policies. We're not requiring anybody to use them. So how would what is in this bill differ from what you're doing? And is there anything in the bill where our prioritizations in the bill, these are questions for the bill, are they different than what IDEA requires you to do for any training, for example? So we want to make sure we have no conflict between what you're doing and what our bill's doing, and make sure we don't have any conflict with IDEA. That's my question.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Summers, did you want a response right now?
That's fine.
Okay. At this point in our review prior to today's meeting, we did not see any conflict. In fact, I think we believe that both pieces could be put into place in harmony.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and I appreciate that. Do you see value in what we're trying to do here? Do you think it helps? Do you think it'll help standardize what's going on out there, provide more certainty that maybe districts look at it? Just your professional opinion that would help.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Summers, I do believe that a lot of the work that the WD does is utilized at the district level. So I would imagine that this would be similar to the other work that we've seen implemented at the district level.
Chair, I'm kind of follow up on Representative Summers' questions because I was the one who kind of brought this forward, that in my mind, what we're looking at and the data that you have, which is what you are obligated to collect, is really just about students who are under the IDEA. And so many other students get suspended and expelled. And your obligations in terms of both understanding and reporting and having an MTSS meeting is in relationship to the IDEA. I'd like us to kind of think beyond that in terms of all kids. And so the idea of having the department, put out some model best practices would be so that districts know how to respond or have some options with how to respond when a kid isn't necessarily under the IDEA where there might be some other specific obligations. Is that something that you find valuable? Or do you believe that districts will find valuable?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Connolly, I do believe that districts would find this valuable. It gives them another tool to use. And I think in the bill that you said that they don't have to necessarily utilize it, but it does give them some best practice and evidence-based policies to follow.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to offer one point of clarification. MTSS is a general education construct. It is for all students.
Okay, MTSS. What do you mean?
Multi-tiered system of support. Multi-tiered system of support.
Mr. Chairman, and I do understand that MTSS is for general education. It's utilized mostly by IDEA, but we'll leave that. I have a completely different question, and I'm just curious, when I look at the data, though limited, that the number of kids who are suspended and percentage of kids who are suspended under the IDEA and Black is much more. It is significantly higher than what would be expected by our population. And I'm just curious if there's been any attention to that kind of racial disparity. It might not be 5% different because it all seems to be the same. But I am curious if there's been any attention to race.
Mr. Chairman and Representative Connolly, apologize. Yes, that's a constant, as I mentioned before, that the Special Education Division Monitoring Team is constantly looking at this data as it's reported. And districts undergo a monitoring visit on a regular cycle. So even if their individual district data doesn't pop as being 5% higher, that's still something that's going to be evaluated and considered as the monitoring team goes into evaluate. So we do see that as an aggregate number is higher, but I guess all I can really say is that as we've done our due diligence to monitor those districts, that we have seen that there is an equitable and a fair application of the district's policies and procedures. There are lots of different protections built in for IDEA students that include a manifestation of determination meetings. So if a student of any race that is on an IEP creates an infraction, they break a rule, there is an opportunity and an obligation for the school special education team to come together to determine if that is a manifestation of that disability. So there are lots of layers of protections for those students. Outside of that, I can't really speak to why that number is higher.
Mr. Chairman, just a question really then on the suspensions versus the expulsions. And so can you see the expulsion data for everybody though? Is that somewhere in there that includes all students, not just IDEA? Did I miss that somehow? Because that's collected separately. Expulsion's a way different deal, way more serious. I mean, probably everybody sitting here got suspended at one time or another, right, growing up. And although I was reading our next bill, I thought I was the last guy to get a SWAT in Wyoming back in 1981 or 80 or whatever. But anyway, back to my question, is there expulsion data different here?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Harshman, we do collect expulsion data for K through 12 students. That is reported. We did provide that data in the last memo in September, and kind of a breakdown and percentages in terms of those numbers are relatively low when we look at those, because schools work tirelessly to try to keep kids in school, but do follow their policies when students need to be expelled.
Further?
We do not, sir.
Do we have any public comment on this issue? Seeing none, committee, I think we'll go ahead and we're going to take up the bills. I think it's scheduled for right after lunch. And we'll be back and try to get started precisely at 1 o'clock.
Mr. Chairman, you have 2 bills scheduled before lunch, and I believe 2 bills after lunch. Sorry, Mr. Chairman, I apologize. You are correct.
Yeah, I think they're all scheduled for after lunch. Schedule.
My apologies.
Okay. You scared me from. Okay. Yeah, we're adjourned till 1 o'clock.